Picture this. You're settling in for a cozy night, getting ready to drift off into dreamland, but instead of counting sheep, how about we count some truly wild facts about one of television's most unpredictable animated families? Tonight, we're diving deep into the bizarre, hilarious, and surprisingly intricate world of Family Guy, and trust me, by the end of this journey, you'll have enough random trivia rattling around in your brain to either help you fall asleep or keep you up all night wondering how Seth MacFarlane's mind works. Let's start with something that might surprise you about the show's origins. Family Guy almost never existed in the form we know today. Back in the late 90s, Seth MacFarlane was working at Hanna-Barbera, the legendary animation studio behind classics like The Flintstones and The Jetsons. He created a short film called The Life of Larry for his thesis project at the Rhode Island School of Design, which featured many of the characters who would eventually become the Griffin family. The short was so impressive that it caught the attention of Fox executives, but here's where it gets interesting. MacFarlane was only 24 years old when he pitched the show, making him one of the youngest creators in television history to get a primetime animated series greenlit. The original concept was quite different from what we see today. Peter Griffin was initially going to be much more of a traditional sitcom dad. Think more like Homer Simpson, but without the yellow skin. The character's personality evolved significantly during the development process, becoming the lovably obnoxious and often controversial figure we know now. MacFarlane has mentioned in interviews that he drew inspiration from his own father's mannerisms and speech patterns, particularly the distinctive Rhode Island accent that Peter sports throughout the series. Here's a fact that might make you appreciate the show's complexity a bit more surface. The average Family Guy episode contains over 300 individual drawings. Each 22-minute episode requires thousands of hours of work from dozens of artists, animators, and voice actors. The animation process alone takes approximately 8 months from initial script to final product, which explains why the show's production schedule is so carefully planned out years in advance. Speaking of voice acting, Seth MacFarlane performs the voices of 4 main characters: Peter, Brian, Stewie, and Glenn Quagmire. But here's something that might blow your mind. He records all of their dialogue separately, often having conversations with himself that last for hours. MacFarlane has described the experience as somewhat surreal, especially when he's voicing emotional scenes between characters like Brian and Stewie, who have some of the most complex relationships on the show. The character of Stewie Griffin deserves special attention because his development represents one of the most dramatic character evolution arcs in animated television history. Originally conceived as a straightforward villain baby bent on world domination and matricide, Stewie gradually transformed into a more nuanced character, exploring themes of sexuality, intelligence, and family dynamics. The shift was so gradual that many viewers didn't notice it happening over the course of several seasons. MacFarlane has stated that this evolution was intentional, reflecting his own growth as a writer and his desire to explore more sophisticated storytelling within the animated comedy format. One of the most fascinating aspects of Family Guy's production involves their approach to cutaway gags, those random tangential moments that have become the show's signature. The writers maintain what they call a gag bank, which is essentially a massive database of potential cutaway ideas that they can draw from when constructing episodes. Some of these gags were written years before they actually appeared on screen, waiting for the right episode and context to make them work. The process of selecting which gags make it into episodes involves multiple rounds of testing and refinement, with the writers constantly evaluating whether a particular joke will land with audiences or fall flat. The show's relationship with controversy has been both a blessing and a curse throughout its run. Family Guy has been canceled twice by Fox, first in 2002 after 3 seasons, and then brought back in 2005 due to strong DVD sales and reruns on Adult Swim. The second cancellation never actually happened, but the show came close several times due to various controversies and ratings fluctuations. What's interesting is that many of the episodes that generated the most controversy also ended up being some of the most popular, suggesting that the show's willingness to push boundaries is intrinsically linked to its success. The voice acting ensemble deserves recognition for their incredible consistency and chemistry. Alex Borstein, who voices Lois, actually auditioned for the role while she was performing in the sketch comedy group MAD-TV. Her distinctive voice for Lois was inspired by her own grandmother, and she's mentioned that she sometimes forgets she's not using her natural speaking voice when recording Lois scenes. Mila Kunis, who voices Meg, was only 14 years old when she started on the show, making her one of the youngest voice actors to land a major role in prime-time animation. The show's musical elements often go unnoticed, but they represent a significant portion of the production effort. Family Guy features more original music than most animated series, with MacFarlane himself composing many of the songs and musical numbers. His background in musical theater strongly influences these segments, and many episodes feature elaborate musical sequences that require additional voice actors, musicians, and extended animation sequences. The episode Road to the Multiverse alone featured over 40 different animation styles and required nearly double the typical production time. Here's something that might surprise fans of the show's seemingly random humor. Family Guy episodes are actually meticulously structured according to classical comedy writing principles. Each episode follows a 3-act structure with carefully planned pacing and timing. The cutaway gags aren't randomly inserted. They're strategically placed to provide relief from main plot tension or to enhance particular jokes. The writers spend considerable time in the editing process, adjusting the timing of these elements to maximize comedic impact. The show's impact on popular culture extends far beyond television. Family Guy has spawned countless internet memes, influenced other animated series, and even affected the way people communicate online. Phrases like, "Oh my God, who the hell cares?" and "What the deuce?" have entered common usage, and the show's irreverent style has influenced everything from advertising to political commentary. The series has also been credited with helping to revive interest in animated comedy among adult audiences, paving the way for shows like Rick and Morty and BoJack Horseman. One of the most technically impressive aspects of Family Guy involves their approach to celebrity impressions and guest voices. The show has featured hundreds of celebrity guest stars over the years, but what's remarkable is how they integrate these appearances into the show's established comic rhythm. Many celebrities have mentioned that recording for Family Guy requires a different approach than traditional voice acting because the timing and delivery style is so specific to the show's aesthetic. The international versions of Family Guy present fascinating variations on the original concept. In different countries, certain cultural references are modified or replaced entirely to make sense to local audiences. The German version, for example, includes completely different cutaway gags that reference German culture and history. These adaptations require not just translation but complete rewriting of significant portions of episodes, essentially creating parallel versions of the same show. Behind the scenes, the Family Guy writing room operates more like a comedy club than a traditional television writing environment. Writers regularly perform their ideas for each other, and the collaborative process involves a lot of improvisation and spontaneous joke development. MacFarlane has described the experience as one of the most creatively fulfilling aspects of producing the show, and many writers who have worked on Family Guy have gone on to create their own successful comedy series. The show's approach to social commentary often flies under the radar because it's wrapped in such outrageous humor. Many episodes tackle serious subjects like politics, religion, and social justice, but they do so through such an absurdist lens that the commentary becomes almost subliminal. This technique allows the show to address controversial topics while maintaining its primarily comedic focus, though it also means that viewers can interpret the show's messages in wildly different ways. Family Guy's influence on animation technology shouldn't be overlooked either. The show was among the first animated series to extensively use digital animation techniques, and their production pipeline has been studied and emulated by animation studios worldwide. The efficiency of their animation process allows them to produce episodes more quickly than many competing shows, which is part of why they've been able to maintain such a consistent release schedule for so many years. The merchandising empire surrounding Family Guy represents another fascinating aspect of the show's cultural impact. From action figures to clothing lines to video games, the show has spawned a massive array of consumer products. What's interesting is how these products often feature jokes and dusky references that only hardcore fans would understand, creating multiple tiers of engagement with the show's content. The show's relationship with censorship provides insight into how television content standards have evolved over the past 2 decades. Early episodes of Family Guy pushed boundaries that were considered quite shocking at the time, but many of those same jokes would barely register as controversial today. The series has served as a kind of barometer for changing social attitudes about humor, language, and acceptable content on television. Looking at Family Guy's longevity, It's remarkable that a show built around such seemingly random humor has maintained relevance for over 2 decades. Part of this success stems from the flexibility of the format, in the end, because the show isn't tied to realistic character development or consistent continuity. It can adapt to changing cultural contexts much more easily than traditional sitcoms. Characters can be completely different from episode to episode without breaking the show's internal logic. The voice recording process for Family Guy involves some unique challenges that most animated shows don't face. Because so many characters are voiced by the same actors, recording sessions often require complex scheduling to allow for quick character switches. McFarlane, in particular, has developed techniques for rapidly shifting between his different character voices, sometimes switching between Peter and Brian mid-sentence during recording sessions. Family Guy's impact on comedy writing extends beyond animation into live-action television and film. Many comedy writers cite the show's fearless approach to offensive humor and its willingness to commit fully to absurd premises as influential in their own work. The show's success proved that audiences were hungry for comedy that didn't follow traditional rules about likability or moral messaging. The technical aspects of producing Family Guy's signature visual style involve more complexity than might be immediately apparent. The seemingly simple character designs actually require precise consistency across hundreds of artists working on each episode. The show maintains detailed style guides that specify everything from the exact curve of Peter's chin to the precise shade of Brian's fur, ensuring visual continuity across different animation teams and production facilities. As we wind down this journey through the wonderfully weird world of Family Guy, it's worth noting that the show continues to evolve and surprise audiences after more than 20 years on the air. Whether you love it or hate it, there's no denying that Family Guy has carved out a unique place in television history, pushing boundaries and challenging expectations in ways that few shows ever attempt. So, there you have it, a deep dive into the bizarre, brilliant, and sometimes bewildering universe of Family Guy. From its humble beginnings as a college thesis project to its status as one of the longest-running animated series in television history, the show represents a fascinating case study in how unconventional creativity can find mainstream success. Sweet dreams. And remember, in the world of Family Guy, literally anything can happen, and usually does. Have you ever wondered what goes on behind the scenes of your favorite animated shows while you're drifting off to sleep? Tonight, we're diving into the fascinating world of Family Guy with some incredibly random facts that might just surprise you. So, grab your blanket, get comfortable, and let's explore the weird and wonderful universe of the Griffin family. Did you know that Family Guy wasn't originally supposed to be called Family Guy at all? Seth MacFarlane's original pitch to Fox was titled The Life of Larry, which was actually a 7-minute short film he created while studying at the Rhode Island School of Design. The executives liked it so much that they asked him to develop it into a full series, but they wanted a catchier name. After going through dozens of potential titles, they settled on Family Guy because it perfectly captured the show's essence of an average American family dealing with extraordinary situations. Speaking of Seth MacFarlane, here's something that might keep you up at night thinking about alternate timelines. MacFarlane was originally scheduled to be on American Airlines Flight 11 on September 11, 2001. He was supposed to fly from Boston to Los Angeles that morning, but he overslept and missed the flight by just 15 minutes. That flight was one of the planes that hit the World Trade Center. If he had made that flight, we might never have gotten Family Guy, American Dad, or The Orville. Sometimes, the smallest moments change everything. Now let's talk about the voices behind your favorite characters. You probably know that Seth MacFarlane voices Peter, Brian, and Stewie, but did you know he also voices Carter Pewterschmidt, Tom Tucker, and even Glenn Quagmire? That's right. The same person who voices the intellectual dog Brian also creates Quagmire's distinctive giggity giggity catchphrase. MacFarlane developed these voices during his college years, often entertaining friends at parties with his impressions and original character voices. Here's a random fact about Stewie that might surprise you. His distinctive football-shaped head wasn't originally part of his design. The animators were struggling with how to make a baby character visually interesting and memorable. During one late-night brainstorming session, someone jokingly suggested making his head shaped like a football, and everyone laughed. But the more they thought about it, the more it made sense. The unusual head shape would make Stewie instantly recognizable and add to his alien-like otherworldly intelligence. Sometimes the best ideas come from the most unexpected places. The character of Meg Griffin has an interesting backstory that goes beyond what we see on screen. Originally, Meg was supposed to be the breakout character of the show. The writers envisioned her as the relatable teenager that audiences would connect with most. However, as the show evolved, they realized that making Meg the constant target of the family's jokes created much funnier dynamics. This shift happened gradually over the first few seasons, and by season 3, Meg's role as the family punching bag was firmly established. Did you know that Family Guy holds several Guinness World Records? One of the most interesting is for the longest gap between a TV show's cancellation and its return to production. Family Guy was canceled in 2002 after 3 seasons, but DVD sales and reruns on Adult Swim proved so popular that Fox brought it back in 2005. That's a 3-year gap, which was unprecedented at the time for an animated series. The famous chicken fight scenes between Peter and Ernie the Giant Chicken have their own fascinating history. The first fight appeared in the episode Da Boom and was originally intended to be a one-off gag. However, the animators had so much fun creating the elaborate fight sequence that they decided to make it a recurring element. Each subsequent chicken fight became more elaborate and destructive, with the animators treating them almost like action movie sequences. The fights have destroyed everything from fast food restaurants to airports, and the animation team spends months planning each new encounter. Here's something that might surprise you about the show's animation process. Each episode of Family Guy takes approximately 8 months to complete from start to finish. The process begins with the writer's room, where scripts are developed and refined. Then comes voice recording, which can take several weeks, as actors often record their lines separately. After that, the storyboard artists create rough sketches of every scene, followed by the actual animation process, which involves hundreds of individual drawings for just a few minutes of screen time. The character of Cleveland Brown was almost written off the show much earlier than his eventual departure for the Cleveland show. During season 2, the writers were struggling with what to do with Cleveland's character, feeling like he didn't have enough distinct personality traits to warrant significant screen time. However, voice actor Mike Henry brought such warmth and humor to the role that the writers decided to develop Cleveland further, eventually giving him his own spin-off series. One of the most random facts about Family Guy involves the show's relationship with real-world events. The writers have an unusual policy about incorporating current events into episodes. Because of the long production timeline, they rarely reference events that happened less than 8 months before an episode airs. This has led to some interesting anachronisms, where characters will reference old news as if it just happened, creating an odd time bubble effect that longtime viewers have learned to expect. The character of Brian Griffin represents one of the most complex writing challenges in the show. Creating a talking dog, who serves as the voice of reason while still maintaining dog-like characteristics, requires a delicate balance. The writers often debate how much human intelligence to give Brian versus when to remind audiences that he's still fundamentally a dog. This internal contradiction has led to some of the show's most interesting character development moments. Did you know that several celebrities have refused to appear on Family Guy due to its controversial content? However, many others have embraced the show's irreverent humor. Adam West, who played the mayor of Quahog, loved his portrayal so much that he considered his Family Guy character to be his favorite role later in his career. West appreciated how the show exaggerated his public persona while still showing genuine affection for his Batman legacy. The Griffin family house has its own interesting design history. The animators based the house's exterior on a real home in Cranston, Rhode Island, not far from where Seth MacFarlane grew up. However, the interior layout was designed to be deliberately confusing and inconsistent. Rooms appear and disappear between episodes, and the house seems to have impossible spatial relationships. This was an intentional choice by the animators, who felt that a realistic house layout would be too limiting for the show's surreal storylines. Here's a fact that might surprise animation fans. Family Guy was one of the first animated shows to extensively use computer-generated imagery mixed with traditional animation. While the characters are still hand-drawn, many background elements, vehicles, and special effects are created using CGI. This hybrid approach allows for more dynamic camera movements and elaborate action sequences while maintaining the classic cartoon aesthetic that fans love. The show's famous cutaway gags have their own unique writing process. The writers maintain a separate document called the Cutaway Bible, which contains hundreds of potential cutaway ideas organized by category. When writing an episode, they can quickly reference this document to find gags that fit the moment. Some cutaways have been in this document for years before finding the right episode to appear in. Quagmire's character design underwent significant changes during the show's early development. Originally, he was going to be much older and was designed to look more like a stereotypical dirty old man. However, the animators felt this made him too creepy and unsympathetic. They gradually made him younger and more cartoonish, which allowed them to push his character's outrageous behavior further while keeping him somewhat likable. The voice of Stewie Griffin required Seth MacFarlane to develop a unique vocal technique to create Stewie's distinctive British accent and sophisticated vocabulary. MacFarlane studied recordings of Rex Harrison, particularly his performance in My Fair Lady. He then combined this with elements of Thurston Howell III from Gilligan's Island to create Stewie's pompous, intellectual tone. MacFarlane has said that Stewie is the most physically demanding character for him to voice, often leaving recording sessions with a sore throat. One of the strangest production facts about Family Guy involves the show's approach to celebrity deaths. The writers maintain a file of pre-written jokes about various celebrities, organized by age and health status. This allows them to quickly produce episodes that reference celebrity deaths without seeming exploitative or rushed. However, they've occasionally had to scrap entire episodes when celebrities they'd written jokes about outlived expectations. The character of Joe Swanson was inspired by a real person that Seth MacFarlane knew in college. Joe's positive attitude, despite his disability, was based on a classmate who had been paralyzed in a skiing accident, but remained one of the most optimistic people MacFarlane had ever met. The writers take Joe's character seriously, often consulting with disability advocacy groups to ensure their portrayal is respectful, while still allowing for contemplation of varioe. The show's trademark humor. Did you know that Family Guy has influenced real-world language? Several phrases from the show have entered common usage, including "giggity, shut up Meg," and "whose leg do you have to hump to get a dry martini around here?" Linguists have noted that the show's impact on casual speech patterns, particularly among younger viewers, has been surprisingly significant for an animated comedy. The show's musical numbers require a completely different production process than regular episodes. Seth MacFarlane, who has a background in musical theater, often writes the songs himself. The production team includes professional musicians and choreographers who help design the elaborate musical sequences. Some of the show's musical episodes have taken over a year to complete, with the songs recorded by full orchestras in professional studios. Here's something that might surprise you about the show's international versions. Family Guy is broadcast in over 50 countries, and many jokes are completely rewritten for different cultures. The German version, for example, changes many of the pop culture references to focus on German celebrities and historical events. The process of adapting the show for international audiences often requires rewriting entire scenes while maintaining the same comedic timing. The character of Death, who appears occasionally throughout the series, was almost given his own spin-off show. The concept would have followed Death as he went about his daily job of collecting souls, with each episode featuring guest appearances by Family Guy characters. The idea was shelved when the writers realized it would be too dark for the show's target demographic, but elements of the concept occasionally appear in Death's appearances on the main show. Family Guy's production team includes several former Disney animators who brought traditional animation techniques to the show's more elaborate sequences. This blend of old-school animation craftsmanship with modern computer technology gives Family Guy a unique visual style that sets it apart from other animated comedies. The animators often hide small details and Easter eggs in background scenes that only dedicated fans notice. The show's approach to time and continuity is deliberately inconsistent, but there's actually a method to the madness. The writers maintain what they call a flexible timeline, where characters can age or remain the same age depending on what serves the story best. This allows them to explore different aspects of characters without being locked into strict chronological progression. One final random fact to end our journey through the world of Family Guy. The show's theme song was originally much longer and included additional verses about each family member. The shortened version we know today was created for time constraints, but the full version occasionally appears in special episodes or DVD extras. Seth MacFarlane has mentioned that he'd love to do an entire episode featuring just the complete theme song with elaborate visuals for each verse. As we wrap up our exploration of these random Family Guy facts, remember that behind every animated comedy lies countless hours of creativity, planning, and attention to detail. Whether you're a longtime fan or just discovering the show, these behind-the-scenes glimpses reveal the incredible amount of work that goes into creating our favorite animated families. Sweet dreams, and maybe you'll dream of cutaway gags and chicken fights tonight. Until next time, keep exploring the fascinating worlds hidden within your favorite shows. Hey there, Night Owls and Family Guy fanatics. If you're settling in for some late-night entertainment and your brain is ready to drift off into dreamland, I've got the perfect collection of wild Family Guy facts that'll either help you doze off peacefully or keep you wide awake wondering how this show even exists. Tonight we're diving deep into the bizarre, chaotic, and absolutely insane world of everyone's favorite dysfunctional animated family. Let me start with something that'll blow your mind right off the bat. Did you know that Peter Griffin has an astronomical body count that would make serial killers jealous? We're talking thousands of deaths. And honestly, most of them happened in the most ridiculous ways possible. This isn't your typical cartoon violence where characters bounce back with cartoon physics. Peter has legitimately caused more destruction than some natural disasters. Speaking of Peter's mayhem, his very first kill happened way back in the second episode of the entire series. Remember that Roadrunner from Looney Tunes? Yeah, Peter straight up ran that bird down with his car, flattening it completely. What makes this even funnier is Peter's reaction afterward, casually asking if he hit an ostrich while the Roadrunner is clearly pancaked on his windshield. This moment basically set the tone for everything that would follow in the series. But here's where things get really wild. Peter once literally took over Death's job in the show, and with that cosmic responsibility came the power to kill people just by touching them. During his stint as the Grim Reaper, he accidentally killed 2 airplane pilots mid-flight simply because he forgot to wear mittens. Can you imagine being a passenger on that plane? Thankfully, actress Karen Black was somehow there to land the aircraft, or everyone would have died in that crash too. The hospital incidents are particularly disturbing when you think about them. Peter somehow convinced people to let him work as a doctor, which is terrifying enough on its own, but then he actually killed a patient during what should have been a routine procedure. The patient even thanked Peter for saving his life right before dying, which adds this darkly comedic layer that only Family Guy could pull off. Here's a fact that might help you sleep better or give you nightmares, depending on your perspective. Peter once worked as a babysitter and literally left a baby to drown in a bathtub. He casually walked away, leaving behind drain cleaner in case of clogs, soap next to a radio, and towels on the roof. The complete negligence and absurdity of this situation perfectly captures Peter's character. He's simultaneously well-meaning and catastrophically incompetent. The show took Peter's violence to cinematic levels during various parody episodes. When they did their Kill Bill homage, Peter went full samurai warrior mode, engaging in what can only be described as a sword-fighting bloodbath. The choreography was surprisingly well animated for a show that usually relies on simple character movements, and Peter managed to take down 15 opponents all by himself in pure martial arts mayhem. Then there's Peter's brief career as a superhero parody called Red Stool, which was obviously their take on Deadpool. The name comes from the fact that his cancer specifically affected his rear end, because of course Family Guy would go there. As Red Stool, Peter maintained Deadpool's tendency for extreme violence, adding several more bodies to his ever-growing count while cracking inappropriate jokes the entire time. The Walter White parody deserves special mention because it perfectly captured the essence of Breaking Bad while maintaining Family Guy's signature chaos. Peter as Heisenberg was just as dangerous as the original, dropping bodies left and right while somehow making it comedically absurd rather than genuinely threatening. The transformation from bumbling father to calculating criminal mastermind was surprisingly well executed for a show known more for cutaway gags than character development. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of Peter's violence is how it affects his own family. He once accidentally killed his entire family through carbon monoxide poisoning, and his reaction was essentially wondering if his day's work was worth it. Sure, they all came back in the next episode because cartoon logic, but the casual way Peter processes causing his loved ones' deaths is genuinely unsettling when you think about it too deeply. The fight scenes with Ernie the Giant Chicken are legendary among Family Guy fans, and for good reason. These battles have spanned multiple episodes and caused more collateral damage than most action movies. They've fought in airports, construction sites, moving trains, and even hijacked time machines to battle across different historical periods. The destruction they cause is absolutely massive, with buildings collapsing, vehicles exploding, and innocent bystanders getting caught in their ridiculous feud. What makes the chicken fights even more absurd is that they started over an expired coupon. Think about that for a moment. These two characters have caused thousands of deaths, millions of dollars in property damage, and untold chaos across multiple dimensions, all because of a disagreement about a coupon's validity. It's the perfect example of Family Guy's ability to take tiny conflicts and escalate them to world-ending proportions. The time travel elements in their fights add another layer of complexity and destruction. When Peter and Ernie crash through different time periods, they're not just affecting the present day, they're literally altering history itself. The poor driver of that futuristic train they destroyed was probably just trying to get to work in his cyberpunk timeline. And suddenly, he's vaporized because two idiots from the early 21st century decided to continue their grocery store dispute across the space-time continuum. Here's something that might surprise you. Peter has actually caused more deaths through his various acts of terrorism, albeit usually accidental ones. When he befriended a terrorist named Mahmoud, Peter was completely oblivious to what was happening. All he cared about was the attention and perks of his new friendship. When Mahmoud gave him what Peter thought was a phone, he kept trying to use it to make calls, not realizing it was actually a bomb detonator. The explosions that resulted from Peter's innocent phone calls were catastrophic. Each time he tried to dial Mahmoud, another building would explode somewhere in the city. The fact that Peter remained completely clueless about what was happening makes it both hilarious and terrifying. Even when the gang managed to stop Mahmoud's planned attack on a bridge, Peter still had that detonator and used it again while trying to call a restaurant for reservations. The crossover episode with The Simpsons showcased Peter's destructive capabilities on an even grander scale. His fight with Homer Simpson leveled entire city blocks and resulted in mass casualties that would normally be associated with natural disasters or military conflicts. The two fathers' brawl started over Peter insulting The Simpsons show, which escalated into a city-destroying conflict that somehow ended with both characters gaining superpowers from radioactive waste. One particularly disturbing sequence involved Peter's brief stint as a high school student, where he arranged for a school shooting to get revenge on popular kids who ignored him. Even though he called it off at the last minute, the attack still went through, and the screams and gunshots in the background suggest multiple casualties among innocent children. This episode aired during a time when such events were unfortunately becoming more common in real life, making Peter's involvement even more unsettling. Peter's various explosions of hospitals deserve special mention for their sheer scale of destruction. When he disagreed with vaccines, he dressed as the Joker and blew up an entire medical facility just to prevent Stewie from getting a shot. The explosion was massive enough to level the building and likely killed dozens of patients, doctors, nurses, and staff members who were just trying to provide health care. But he didn't stop there. Peter later destroyed a children's hospital in another equally senseless act of destruction. The casual way the show presents these incidents, with Peter treating the explosions like minor inconveniences rather than mass casualty events, perfectly captures the dark comedy that Family Guy specializes in. It's simultaneously hilarious and deeply disturbing. The missile incidents showcase Peter's ability to cause destruction on a military scale. During his fight with President Trump, Peter's head got slammed onto a big red button that launched multiple missiles. Each missile likely killed hundreds of people in massive explosions, turning what started as a personal dispute into an international incident with catastrophic consequences. What's particularly interesting about Peter's character is how the show manages to make him sympathetic despite his astronomical body count. He's never intentionally malicious. He's just incredibly stupid and impulsive with access to dangerous situations. This combination makes him simultaneously lovable and terrifying, which is probably why the character has remained popular for over 2 decades. The physics of Peter's destruction often defy logic, even by cartoon standards. When he and Ernie crashed that Ferris wheel, It rolled through the city like a massive wheel of death, flattening everything in its path. The scale of destruction was apocalyptic, but it was presented with such absurd cartoon logic that viewers could laugh at it rather than being horrified by the implications. Peter's various career changes always seem to result in multiple casualties. Whether he's working as a doctor, babysitter, death himself, or any other profession, people end up dying as a direct result of his incompetence. It's actually impressive how consistently dangerous he is across all walks of life. There's literally no job safe enough for Peter Griffin to perform without causing fatalities. The show's commitment to continuity regarding Peter's violence is surprisingly strong for a series that usually ignores consequences. Characters who die in one episode rarely come back, unless there's a specific plot reason, and the destruction Peter causes often gets referenced in later episodes. This attention to detail makes his actions feel more impactful than typical cartoon violence. Here's a fun sleeping fact. The total estimated death toll directly caused by Peter Griffin throughout the series is approaching 3,000 people. That number includes direct kills, collateral damage from his fights, explosions he's caused, and various accidents resulting from his stupidity. To put that in perspective, Peter has personally caused more deaths than many historical disasters. The international incidents Peter has triggered would realistically make him one of the most wanted criminals on the planet. He's blown up bridges, destroyed government buildings, launched military missiles, and caused diplomatic crises with multiple countries. Yet somehow he continues living his normal suburban life without any legal consequences, which is perhaps the most unrealistic aspect of a show featuring a talking baby and a martini-drinking dog. As you drift off to sleep tonight, remember that somewhere in the Family Guy universe, Peter Griffin is probably causing another catastrophe that will add to his ever-growing body count. Sweet dreams, and maybe avoid any neighborhoods where middle-aged men are having disputes with large poultry. In the world of Family Guy, such conflicts have a tendency to escalate into city-leveling disasters that make natural catastrophes look like minor inconveniences. The beautiful absurdity of Peter's character is that despite being responsible for more destruction than most fictional supervillains, he's still somehow the protagonist we're supposed to root for. That's the magic of Family Guy, taking the most inappropriate situations and making them laugh out loud funny through sheer audacity and perfect comedic timing. Now close your eyes and let these wonderfully bizarre facts carry you off into dreamland, where hopefully giant chickens and expired coupons can't hurt you.
Have you ever wondered why Family Guy was actually canceled twice before becoming one of the most successful animated shows in television history?
Or why Seth MacFarlane almost died in the September 11th attacks, but a twist of fate involving a hangover literally saved his life? Today we're diving deep into the hidden world of Family Guy lore that will completely change how you watch this iconic show. Most people think they know everything about the Griffin family, but the truth is, there are layers of secrets, controversies, and mind-blowing, behind-the-scenes stories that Fox never wanted you to discover. From voice actors who were replaced without anyone noticing, to episodes that were banned from ever airing again, we're about to uncover the most shocking Family Guy secrets that have been hiding in plain sight for over 2 decades. But first, let me blow your mind with something that happened before the show even premiered. Seth MacFarlane was supposed to be on American Airlines Flight 11 on September 11, 2001, the same flight that crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. He had a ticket, his bags were packed, and he should have been on that plane. But here's the crazy part that nobody talks about. He overslept because he was hungover from a party the night before. That hangover literally saved his life and changed the entire trajectory of television comedy. Think about it for a second. If MacFarlane had made that flight, there would be no Family Guy, no American Dad, no The Orville, no billion-dollar animation empire. One night of partying in 2001 accidentally preserved one of the most influential creators in modern entertainment. But that's just the beginning of how strange and interconnected the Family Guy universe really gets. Let's start with something that will mess with your head every time you watch the show from now on. Mila Kunis, the voice of Meg Griffin, was only 14 years old when she started voicing the character. 14. She literally grew up recording in that booth, and her voice changing during puberty became part of Meg's character development. But here's the part that's even more insane. She lied about her age to get the job. When Kunis auditioned, She told the casting directors she was 18. She figured by the time they found out the truth, she'd already be established in the role. Her gamble paid off, but it created a bizarre situation where a teenage girl was voicing sexual jokes in adult situations that she wasn't even old enough to fully understand. The writers had to be careful about what lines they gave Meg because they had a minor in the recording booth. Speaking of voice acting mysteries, here's something that will make you question everything you think you know about the show's consistency. Phyllis Diller, the legendary comedian, was originally supposed to be the voice of Peter's mother, Thelma Griffin. She recorded several episodes worth of dialogue before the creators decided to kill off the character and replace her with Alex Borstein voicing Peter's new mother-in-law, Barbara Puderschmidt. But the weirdest part isn't that they changed voice actors, it's that they kept some of Phyllis Diller's recorded lines and mixed them with Alex Borstein's voice work in certain episodes. If you listen carefully to some of the early season episodes, you can actually hear the subtle differences in vocal tone and delivery that reveal this hidden voice actor swap that most fans never noticed. Now let's talk about the episode that almost destroyed Family Guy before it even became successful. The episode called When You Wish Upon a Weinstein was considered so controversial that it was pulled from Fox's lineup and didn't air until years later on Cartoon Network. The episode dealt with Peter wanting his family to convert to Judaism because he believed Jewish people were naturally good with money. The controversy wasn't just about the content, it was about the timing. This episode was supposed to air just months after the September 11th attacks, when religious tensions were at an all-time high. Fox executives were terrified that the episode would spark protests, boycotts, and potentially violent reactions. They locked the episode away and pretended it didn't exist for nearly 3 years. But here's what makes this story even more complex. Seth MacFarlane fought tooth and nail to get the episode aired because he believed it was actually pro-Jewish and was celebrating Jewish culture rather than mocking it. He felt that Fox was being cowardly and missing the point of the satire entirely. The battle over this one episode created a rift between MacFarlane and Fox executives that influenced how the show was handled for years afterward. This brings us to one of the most shocking secrets in Family Guy history. The show was actually canceled twice, and both times it came back from the dead through pure accident. The first cancellation happened after season 2, because Fox executives thought the show was too expensive to produce and wasn't attracting the right demographic. They wanted younger viewers, but Family Guy was primarily watched by college students and adults. Here's where it gets interesting. After the cancellation, Cartoon Network picked up the reruns and started airing them late at night. The show found its audience in this late-night slot, with viewers who were exactly the demographic Fox had been trying to reach. College students would come home from parties and watch Family Guy marathons until sunrise. The show became a cultural phenomenon through syndication, something that had never happened before with an animated series. The DVD sales were equally shocking. The first season DVD became one of the best-selling television DVDs of all time, outselling many major Hollywood movies. Fox executives couldn't ignore the numbers anymore. They had accidentally created a gold mine and then thrown it away. The revival of Family Guy after its first cancellation changed how television networks think about syndication and DVD sales forever. But the second cancellation is even more bizarre. After bringing the show back, Fox canceled it again after season 4 because they claimed it wasn't performing well in its Sunday night time slot. What they didn't tell anyone was that they were deliberately sabotaging the show by moving it around the schedule constantly. Some episodes aired on different nights without any promotion, making it nearly impossible for fans to keep track of when new episodes were airing. Seth MacFarlane was so frustrated with Fox's treatment of the show that he seriously considered moving Family Guy to a different network entirely. Comedy Central and Cartoon Network both made offers to pick up the series, which would have been unprecedented at the time. The idea of a major animated series switching networks mid-run had never happened before. What saved Family Guy the second time wasn't fan campaigns or DVD sales. It was the iTunes revolution. When Family Guy episodes became available for digital purchase, they consistently ranked as some of the most downloaded television content. Fox suddenly realized they had a digital gold mine on their hands and brought the show back for a third time. Now let's dive into some character secrets that will change how you see the Griffin family forever. Brian Griffin, the talking dog, was originally supposed to be much more of a background character. Seth MacFarlane voices Brian himself, and the character was initially just meant to provide occasional witty commentary. But MacFarlane found that Brian's voice came so naturally to him that he started writing more and more scenes for the character. Here's the mind-bending part. Brian Griffin is essentially Seth MacFarlane's alter ego. Almost every political opinion, cultural reference, and intellectual observation that comes out of Brian's mouth reflects MacFarlane's actual views. When Brian goes on rants about politics, religion, or social issues, you're literally hearing Seth MacFarlane's personal opinions filtered through a cartoon dog character. This became controversial when fans started to notice that Brian was becoming increasingly preachy and self-righteous in later seasons. Critics accused MacFarlane of using the character as a mouthpiece for his liberal political views, turning Family Guy into a platform for his personal agenda. The backlash became so intense that MacFarlane actually killed off Brian in a shocking episode, only to bring him back a few episodes later after massive fan outrage. But the Brian death episode reveals something even more interesting about how Family Guy operates behind the scenes. The writers had been planning Brian's temporary death for over a year, and they deliberately leaked fake spoilers to throw fans off the scent. They created elaborate fake scripts and even recorded fake voice acting sessions to maintain the secrecy of their plan. Stewie Griffin presents another layer of hidden complexity that most viewers completely miss. The character was originally designed to be a one-dimensional villain baby who wanted to kill his mother and take over the world. But as the show evolved, Stewie became more complex, and his sexuality became a subject of constant speculation and debate. Seth MacFarlane has given contradictory statements about Stewie's sexual orientation over the years, sometimes saying the character is gay, sometimes saying he's too young for sexuality to matter, and sometimes saying it's deliberately ambiguous. But here's what most people don't know. There are actually two different versions of Stewie, depending on who he's interacting with. When Stewie talks to Brian, he's portrayed as intelligent, sophisticated, and possibly gay. When he interacts with his family members, he's more like a regular baby with occasional moments of evil genius behavior. This isn't accidental. It's a deliberate, creative choice that reflects how different people see us differently in various relationships and contexts. The Stewie and Brian dynamic became so popular that entire episodes started focusing exclusively on their adventures together. These episodes, often called road trip episodes by fans, consistently rank among the most popular Family Guy episodes of all time. The chemistry between Seth MacFarlane's two most personal character voices created some of the show's most memorable moments. Let's talk about the celebrity guest stars and the shocking stories behind their appearances. When Drew Barrymore appeared on the show, she was going through a particularly difficult period in her personal life. The recording session was supposed to take 2 hours, but she stayed for 6 hours because she was having so much fun with the cast and crew. She later said that working on Family Guy was therapeutic during a time when she was struggling with addiction issues. But the most surprising celebrity appearance almost never happened. Patrick Stewart, who voices Susie Swanson, initially turned down the role because he thought the show was too crude and beneath his classical theater background. It was only after his agent convinced him to watch several episodes that he realized the show's intelligence hidden beneath its seemingly juvenile humor. Stewart became so invested in the character that he started suggesting storylines and character developments for Susie. He even offered to voice additional characters for free because he enjoyed the creative process so much. His enthusiasm for the show shocked many of his colleagues in classical theater who couldn't understand why a Shakespearean actor would want to be associated with Family Guy. The show's relationship with censorship creates another layer of hidden stories that most fans never hear about. There's an entire archive of Family Guy jokes, scenes, and episodes that were deemed too controversial to ever air. Some of these involve real celebrities who threatened legal action, while others were considered too offensive even for Family Guy's notoriously boundary-pushing standards. One particular episode that was completely scrapped dealt with Lois having an affair with a character based on a real-life politician. The episode was fully animated and voice recorded before Fox executives realized the potential legal and political ramifications. The entire episode was locked away and will likely never see the light of day. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect of Family Guy lore involves the show's influence on other animated series. South Park creators Trey Parker and Matt Stone have had a long-running feud with Seth MacFarlane, claiming that Family Guy relies too heavily on random pop culture references instead of actual jokes. This feud played out in several South Park episodes that directly mocked Family Guy's writing style. The rivalry became so intense that it actually influenced how both shows developed their comedy. Family Guy started incorporating more story-driven humor to counter South Park's criticism, while South Park began using more visual gags and pop culture references to prove they could do Family Guy's style better than Family Guy itself. Here's something that will completely change how you watch Family Guy cutaway gags from now on. Those random flashback scenes that seem completely disconnected from the main plot? Many of them are actually recycled jokes from Seth MacFarlane's college animation projects and failed pilot episodes. The writers have been mining MacFarlane's old material for decades, updating and reworking jokes that were originally created in the 1,990 seconds. Some of the most popular Family Guy moments are actually 20-year-old jokes that have been given new animation and context. The peanut butter jelly time sequence, one of the show's most famous moments, was based on an internet meme that MacFarlane had been wanting to incorporate into his work for years before Family Guy even existed. As Family Guy approaches its 25th season, these hidden stories and secret histories continue to shape how the show develops. Seth MacFarlane has hinted that there are major revelations about the Griffin family that haven't been revealed yet, suggesting that even longtime fans don't know everything about these characters they've been watching for decades. The show that started as a simple animated sitcom has become a complex web of cultural commentary, personal expression, and industry politics that extends far beyond what appears on screen. Every episode carries the weight of canceled seasons, industry battles, and creative compromises that most viewers never suspect. Understanding this hidden lore doesn't just make Family Guy more interesting. It reveals how the entire landscape of adult animation has been shaped by the accidents, controversies, and creative battles that brought the Griffin family to life and kept them alive against all odds. What if I told you that Family Guy was originally supposed to end after just 3 seasons, and that Seth MacFarlane almost died on September 11th, which completely changed the show's trajectory? The animated series that millions of people watch every day has some absolutely mind-blowing secrets hiding beneath its crude humor and cutaway gags that most fans have never heard about. I've spent countless hours diving deep into the production history, behind-the-scenes drama, and hidden connections that make Family Guy one of the most fascinating shows on television. From celebrity feuds that shaped entire storylines to animation techniques that revolutionized the industry, this show has more layers than you might imagine. Let me take you on a journey through the most incredible Family Guy secrets that will completely change how you watch the show. We're going to uncover everything from the real-life inspirations behind your favorite characters to the corporate battles that almost killed the series multiple times. Trust me, by the end of this video, you'll never look at Stewie, Peter, or even Brian the same way again. First, let's talk about something that literally saved Seth MacFarlane's life and indirectly saved Family Guy from never existing. On September 11th, 2001, MacFarlane was supposed to be on American Airlines Flight 11, the first plane that hit the World Trade Center. He had a ticket and was scheduled to fly from Boston to Los Angeles that morning. The only reason he survived was because his travel agent gave him the wrong departure time, telling him the flight left at 8:15 when it actually left at 7:45. MacFarlane overslept, arrived at the airport, and discovered he had missed his flight by just 10 minutes. He was initially frustrated about missing the flight and having to reschedule his meetings in Los Angeles. It wasn't until he was sitting in the airport waiting area that he saw the news reports and realized the plane he was supposed to be on had crashed into the North Tower. This near-death experience profoundly impacted MacFarlane's approach to Family Guy. The show's later seasons began incorporating more political commentary and social satire, partly because MacFarlane felt he had been given a second chance to use his platform meaningfully. The controversial episodes that tackle everything from religion to politics can be traced back to this life-changing moment when MacFarlane realized how fragile life really is. But that's just the beginning of Family Guy's incredible origin story. The show itself was born from MacFarlane's college thesis film at the Rhode Island School of Design. He created a 9-minute animated short called The Life of Larry, featuring a character named Larry Cummings, who was essentially a prototype for Peter Griffin. The animation was crude, the jokes were simpler, but the DNA of Family Guy was already there. What's absolutely fascinating is that MacFarlane submitted this college project to the animation studio Hanna-Barbera, and they were so impressed they hired him immediately. He was just 22 years old and suddenly found himself working on shows like Johnny Bravo and Cow and Chicken. But MacFarlane had bigger dreams for his Larry character. He spent 2 years developing and refining the concept, eventually creating another short film called Larry and Steve, which featured the first appearance of a Brian-like dog character. This short caught the attention of Fox executives who were desperately looking for animated content to compete with The Simpsons. The network gave MacFarlane an unprecedented deal, making him the youngest executive producer in television history at age 24. The character inspirations go much deeper than most people realize. Peter Griffin wasn't just a random creation. He was actually based on a security guard that MacFarlane knew during his time working at Hanna-Barbera. This security guard had the same loud, obnoxious personality and even shared some of Peter's physical characteristics. MacFarlane has said in interviews that he would observe this guard's behavior and mannerisms, essentially using him as a real-life reference for what would become one of television's most iconic characters. Stewie Griffin's character has an even more complex origin story. Initially, MacFarlane envisioned Stewie as a completely different type of character. In the original concept, Stewie was going to be much more obviously evil and would have actually succeeded in some of his schemes to kill Lois. The character was inspired by the child villain from a 1970 seconds British film, but MacFarlane realized that having a baby actually commit murder would make the show too dark for network television. The decision to make Stewie more ambiguously evil and eventually more sympathetic was one of the best creative choices the show ever made. It allowed the character to evolve over multiple seasons, becoming less focused on matricide and more focused on time travel, world domination, and his complex relationship with Brian. This evolution wasn't planned from the beginning, but happened organically as the writers discovered what worked best for the character. Speaking of Brian, his character represents something unprecedented in animated television. While other shows had featured talking animals, Brian was the first cartoon dog to be treated as a complete intellectual equal to the human characters. MacFarlane made a conscious decision to never explain how Brian learned to talk or why he's so intelligent compared to other dogs in the show's universe. This creative choice was actually controversial within the animation industry because it broke the traditional rules of cartoon logic. Most animated shows establish clear parameters for their fantastical elements, but Family Guy deliberately leaves Brian's abilities unexplained. This ambiguity allows the character to function as both comic relief and serious dramatic foil, depending on what the story requires. The show's distinctive cutaway gag structure wasn't part of the original concept either. In the early episodes, Family Guy followed a more traditional sitcom structure with linear storytelling. The famous random cutaways that interrupt the main plot were actually added later when MacFarlane realized they could use these moments to explore more surreal and experimental types of humor. These cutaways became the show's signature element, but they also created massive production challenges. Each cutaway requires additional character designs, backgrounds, and sometimes entirely different animation styles. A single episode might feature dozens of different mini-scenes that have nothing to do with the main plot, essentially making every Family Guy episode like 3 or 4 different shows combined into one. The voice acting process reveals another fascinating layer of the show's complexity. Seth MacFarlane voices 4 of the main characters: Peter, Brian, Stewie, and Glenn Quagmire. What most people don't realize is that he records all of these voices in different sessions to maintain consistency. He can't switch between the voices quickly enough during regular recording sessions, so each character's dialogue is recorded separately and then edited together. MacFarlane has mentioned that Peter Griffin's voice is the most physically demanding because it requires him to strain his vocal cords to achieve that distinctive gravelly tone. After long recording sessions, McFarlane sometimes loses his natural speaking voice temporarily because of the physical stress of performing Peter's dialogue. The show's relationship with censorship has created some of the most interesting behind-the-scenes stories in television history. Family Guy pushes boundaries constantly, but there's actually a sophisticated system of negotiations between the writers and network censors. The writers deliberately include jokes that they know will be rejected, using them as bargaining chips to keep the jokes they really want. This strategy has allowed Family Guy to get away with content that would never make it onto other network shows. The censors focus their attention on the obviously problematic material, which gives the writers cover to include more subtle but equally controversial content. It's essentially a game of misdirection that happens during every episode's production process. One of the most significant moments in Family Guy history happened when the show was actually canceled by Fox in 2002 after just 3 seasons. The network executives felt the show was too expensive to produce and wasn't attracting enough viewers in key demographics. This cancellation seemed like the end of the story, but something unprecedented happened next. The show's reruns on Cartoon Network's Adult Swim block became incredibly popular, attracting larger audiences than the original Fox broadcasts had achieved. Simultaneously, the Family Guy DVD sales broke records for animated television releases. Fans were literally buying seasons of a canceled show faster than DVDs of shows that were still in production. This combination of strong cable ratings and exceptional DVD sales convinced Fox to bring Family Guy back from the dead, making it the first canceled series in television history to be revived based primarily on home video performance. The revival created a new business model that other networks began copying, proving that traditional ratings weren't the only way to measure a show's value. The resurrection of Family Guy also changed how the show approached storytelling. When McFarlane returned to production, he knew the show had been given an unlikely second chance, and this awareness influenced the writing in subtle but important ways. The characters became more self-aware, the jokes became more metatextual, and the show began directly addressing its own cancellation and revival in various episodes. Behind the scenes, the animation process for Family Guy utilizes techniques that most viewers never notice, but which significantly impact the show's distinctive look. Unlike many other animated series that use traditional cell animation or simple digital techniques, Family Guy employs a hybrid approach that combines hand-drawn character animation with digitally created backgrounds and effects. This hybrid technique allows the animators to create more dynamic camera movements and complex visual gags than would be possible with purely traditional methods. The show's famous chicken fights, elaborate musical numbers, and surreal cutaway sequences all rely on this sophisticated blend of old and new animation technologies. The writing room for Family Guy operates differently from most television shows because of the unique challenges created by the cutaway structure. The writers have to create 2 different types of content for every episode: the main storyline that follows traditional narrative rules, and the cutaway material that can be completely disconnected from reality. This dual writing process means that Family Guy episodes are actually much more complex to construct than they appear on screen. The writers have to ensure that the cutaways don't disrupt the pacing of the main story, while also making sure that each mini-scene within the cutaways has its own complete comedic arc. It's like writing a regular television episode while simultaneously writing dozens of very short comedy sketches. The show's impact on popular culture extends far beyond just entertainment. Family Guy has influenced internet meme culture more than almost any other television show, with countless jokes, phrases, and visual gags becoming viral content across social media platforms. The Surfin' Bird episode alone generated thousands of remixes, parodies, and tribute videos from fans around the world. This cultural influence wasn't accidental but resulted from McFarlane's deliberate decision to make the show's humor as quotable and shareable as possible. The cutaway structure naturally creates bite-sized pieces of content that work perfectly for online sharing, essentially making every episode a collection of potential viral moments. The business side of Family Guy reveals how successful the show has become beyond just television ratings. The merchandise empire includes everything from action figures to video games, generating hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue annually. The show's characters have appeared in commercials, theme park attractions, and even academic studies about animation and comedy. What makes this commercial success particularly interesting is that it happened despite the show being canceled once and facing constant criticism from various groups. Family Guy proved that controversial content could be incredibly profitable if it connected with audiences authentically, creating a template that many other shows have tried to follow. The voice cast beyond Seth MacFarlane includes some fascinating stories about how actors were recruited and how their characters evolved. Alex Borstein, who voices Lois Griffin, was actually hired before the show was even greenlit by Fox. MacFarlane was so impressed by her audition that he wrote additional material specifically for her character, expanding Lois's role far beyond what was originally planned. Mila Kunis, who voices Meg Griffin, was just 14 years old when she started working on the show. Her voice literally changed during the early seasons as she went through adolescence while recording the character. The producers had to make subtle adjustments to accommodate her changing vocal range, creating a unique situation where a cartoon character's voice evolved naturally over time. The show's approach to celebrity guest stars differs significantly from other animated series. While The Simpsons typically has celebrities play versions of themselves, Family Guy often has famous actors voice completely original characters or play historical figures in cutaway gags. This approach allows the show to utilize celebrity talent in more creative and unexpected ways. Some of the most memorable Family Guy moments feature celebrities doing things they would never do on other shows. Precisely because the animated format and the show's irreverent tone give everyone involved permission to be more experimental. The result is guest performances that often become more famous than the celebrities' live-action work. The international versions of Family Guy reveal how the show's humor translates across different cultures and languages. The cutaway gags often require complete restructuring for international audiences because the references are too specifically American to make sense in other countries. Foreign language versions sometimes feature entirely different jokes that serve the same comedic function but use locally relevant references. This localization process has created dozens of different versions of Family Guy that share the same characters and basic structure but feature significantly different content. In some ways, these international versions are like alternate universe versions of the show, exploring how the same comedic sensibilities might express themselves in different cultural contexts. The technological evolution of Family Guy's production reflects broader changes in the animation industry. Early episodes were produced using techniques that were already becoming obsolete, while recent seasons utilized cutting-edge digital tools that would have been impossible when the show first aired. Despite these technical advances, the show has maintained its distinctive visual style by deliberately limiting how much the animation quality improves. This conscious decision to maintain visual consistency has allowed Family Guy to feel timeless in ways that many other long-running animated series don't achieve. Episodes from different decades can be watched together without jarring visual discontinuities, creating a cohesive viewing experience across more than 20 years of production. The legacy of Family Guy extends beyond entertainment into academic and cultural analysis. Universities offer courses that study the show as an example of postmodern comedy, examining how its cutaway structure reflects contemporary media consumption patterns and attention spans. The show has essentially become a case study in how traditional narrative techniques can be deconstructed while still maintaining audience engagement. As Family Guy continues into its third decade of production, its influence on comedy, animation, and popular culture remains undeniable. From Seth MacFarlane's near-death experience that changed everything, to the unprecedented cancellation and revival that rewrote television business models, the show represents one of the most fascinating success stories in entertainment history. The next time you watch Peter Griffin stumble through another ridiculous adventure or listen to Stewie's sophisticated observations, remember that you're experiencing the result of countless creative decisions, business battles, and pure accidents that somehow combine to create something truly unique in television history. You know that feeling when you're lying in bed, scrolling through your phone at 2 a.m, and you just need something to help your brain wind down? Well, tonight we're diving into the wonderfully weird world of Family Guy with some absolutely random facts that'll either put you to sleep or keep you up wondering how Seth MacFarlane's mind actually works. So grab your pillow, get comfortable, and let's explore the bizarre universe of Quahog together. Did you know that Family Guy was actually canceled not once, but twice? The show first got the axe in 2002 after just 3 seasons, but something incredible happened that brought it back from the dead. Adult Swim started airing reruns, and the show's popularity exploded like Peter Griffin trying to open a jar of pickles. The DVD sales went through the roof, and suddenly Fox realized they'd made a massive mistake. So in 2005, Family Guy came back from cancellation, making it one of the very few shows in television history to pull off this resurrection trick twice. Speaking of resurrections, here's something that might surprise you about Brian Griffin's voice. Seth MacFarlane, who voices the intellectual dog, actually based Brian's sophisticated accent and mannerisms on his own personality. MacFarlane has said in interviews that Brian is essentially his voice in the show, which explains why the dog often serves as the voice of reason, at least when he's not having his own ridiculous adventures. It's almost like MacFarlane created his own animated alter ego to comment on the chaos around him. Now here's a fact that'll make you appreciate the show's attention to detail, even in its most absurd moments. The Griffin family's address is 31 Spooner Street, and this isn't just a random number pulled out of thin air. The address is actually a reference to the street where one of the show's early writers lived. But what's even more interesting is that if you look carefully at episodes throughout the series, you'll notice that the layout of the Griffin house has changed multiple times. Sometimes there are different numbers of windows, the staircase moves around, and rooms appear and disappear like they're in some kind of cartoon physics experiment. Let's talk about Stewie Griffin for a moment, because this character has one of the most fascinating evolution arcs in animated television. In the early seasons, Stewie was genuinely diabolical, plotting to kill his mother Lois and take over the world with elaborate schemes that would make a Bond villain jealous. But as the series progressed, the writers gradually shifted his character from evil mastermind to sophisticated, cultured, and eventually openly exploring his sexuality. Seth MacFarlane has mentioned that this evolution happened naturally as they discovered what made the character funnier and more relatable. Here's something that might blow your mind about the show's production process. Each episode of Family Guy takes approximately 10 months to complete, from start to finish. That means when you're watching a new episode, the writers were working on it almost a year ago. This lengthy production timeline is part of why the show sometimes feels like it's commenting on events that happened ages ago, but it also explains the incredible attention to detail in the animation and voice work. Did you know that the famous chicken fights between Peter and Ernie the Giant Chicken weren't originally planned to become a recurring gag? The first chicken fight appeared in a Season 1 episode as a quick throwaway joke, but it became so popular with fans that the writers kept bringing it back, each time making the fights longer and more elaborate. These sequences have become some of the most expensive and time-consuming parts of the show to animate, sometimes taking up several minutes of screen time with incredibly detailed action sequences. Speaking of expensive sequences, the show's cutaway gags, those random flashbacks that interrupt the main story, were actually inspired by classic comedy shows like The Carol Burnett Show. Seth MacFarlane wanted to recreate that feeling of sketches within a larger show, but he took it to the extreme by making the cutaways completely disconnected from the main plot. Some of these gags have become so iconic that they've spawned their own merchandise and internet memes. Here's a heartwarming fact about the show's impact on real families. Despite all the dysfunction and chaos of the Griffin family, many real families have said that watching Family Guy together has actually brought them closer. There's something about laughing at Peter's ridiculous antics that makes your own family's problems seem manageable in comparison. The show has become a bonding experience for parents and older children who can appreciate the humor together. Let's dive into some voice acting trivia that'll make you listen to the characters differently. Mila Kunis, who voices Meg Griffin, was only 14 years old when she started on the show. She actually lied about her age during the audition process, and by the time the producers found out how young she really was, they were so impressed with her work that they kept her on. She's been voicing Meg for over 20 years now, which means she's literally grown up with the character. Here's something interesting about the show's relationship with censorship. While Family Guy pushes boundaries constantly, There are actually several episodes that have never aired on television due to content issues. These episodes exist in various forms, sometimes appearing on DVD releases or streaming platforms with heavy warnings. The writers often create content knowing it might be too controversial for broadcast, almost as a creative challenge to see how far they can push the envelope. The character of Cleveland Brown was so popular that he got his own spin-off show, but here's something you might not know about that decision. The Cleveland show was partly created because Mike Henry, who voices Cleveland, wanted to explore what it would be like to have an animated show centered around an African-American family. While the spin-off only lasted 4 seasons, it allowed the writers to tackle different types of stories and social issues than they could in Family Guy. Did you know that several major celebrities have turned down guest appearances on Family Guy because they felt the show was too controversial? But for every celebrity who said no, there were dozens who said yes, often because they were fans of the show themselves. Some of the most surprising guest stars have been people you'd never expect to appear on an adult animated comedy, including several politicians and news anchors who were willing to make fun of themselves. Here's a production fact that shows how much work goes into creating the show's signature style. The animators use a specific color palette that's deliberately muted compared to other animated shows. This choice was made to give Family Guy a slightly more realistic feel, even though the content is completely absurd. The character designs are also intentionally simple, which allows the animators to focus on facial expressions and body language that enhance the comedy. Let's talk about the show's impact on internet culture. Family Guy was one of the first television shows to really embrace social media and online fan communities. The writers regularly read fan feedback and sometimes incorporate popular fan theories or suggestions into actual episodes. This interaction between creators and fans was revolutionary for television at the time and has influenced how many other shows approach their online presence. Here's something that might surprise you about the show's educational value. Despite its reputation for crude humor, Family Guy has actually introduced many viewers to classical music, literature, and historical references they might never have encountered otherwise. The show's cutaway gags often reference everything from Shakespeare to classical composers, and many fans have said they discovered new interests because of jokes they didn't initially understand. The relationship between Family Guy and The Simpsons has always been interesting, especially since both shows air on the same network. There have been several crossover episodes and references between the shows, but there's also been some friendly rivalry. Seth MacFarlane has always acknowledged The Simpsons as a major influence, but he's also tried to carve out a distinct identity for Family Guy that sets it apart from Matt Groening's creation. Here's a fact about the show's international reach that might surprise you. Family Guy has been translated into dozens of languages and adapted for different cultures around the world. In some countries, certain jokes have to be completely rewritten because the original references don't translate culturally. This has led to some interesting variations where different versions of the same episode can have completely different gags while maintaining the same basic story structure. Did you know that several episodes of Family Guy have been turned into stage productions? There have been live performances of selected episodes at various comedy festivals, with voice actors performing their roles on stage while animation plays in the background. These performances have given fans a unique way to experience the show and have shown how well the writing works, even without the visual component. The show's theme song, which seems simple enough, actually went through multiple versions before the creators settled on the current one. The original pilot had a completely different opening sequence, and there have been several special versions created for holiday episodes and milestone celebrations. The song has become so iconic that it's been covered by numerous bands and has appeared in various other media as a cultural reference. Point. Here's something about the writing process that shows how collaborative the show really is. While Seth MacFarlane created the show and voices several main characters, the writing staff includes dozens of people who contribute jokes, storylines, and character development. Some of the funniest gags in the show come from writers who might never be credited on screen, but whose contributions are essential to the show's success. Let's talk about how Family Guy handles continuity, or rather, how it completely ignores it when convenient. Characters die and come back to life. Relationships change from episode to episode, and major life events are forgotten or contradicted regularly. This approach to storytelling was initially criticized by some viewers who expected more consistency, but it's actually become one of the show's defining characteristics, allowing for maximum creative freedom. The merchandising empire built around Family Guy is absolutely massive, including everything from action figures to clothing to home decor items featuring the characters. But here's something interesting. Some of the most popular merchandise features quotes and images from the most controversial episodes, suggesting that fans embrace the show's boundary-pushing content rather than shy away from it. Finally, here's a fact that brings us full circle to why Family Guy works so well as late-night viewing. The show's creators have always understood that comedy is often about timing and rhythm, and they've structured episodes to have natural peaks and valleys of energy. This makes it perfect for falling asleep to, because your brain can follow the familiar patterns even as you drift off, and the comfort of recognizing character voices and running gags creates a soothing background that helps many people relax. As you settle in for sleep tonight, remember that somewhere in the world, there are animators working on new Family Guy episodes that won't air for almost a year, writers brainstorming increasingly ridiculous scenarios for Peter to stumble into, and voice actors bringing these beloved characters to life. The world of Quahog continues to evolve and surprise us, proving that even after more than 20 years, there are still new stories to tell and new ways to make us laugh at the beautiful absurdity of it all. Sweet dreams. And may your subconscious be filled with talking dogs, evil babies, and the gentle chaos of the Griffin family household. What if I told you that behind the perfect housewife facade lies one of television's most twisted characters? The woman you think you know as the voice of reason in the Griffin household has actually murdered multiple people, cheated on her husband at least 12 times, and may have given birth to a child who isn't even his. This is the untold story of Lois Griffin, and trust me, it's darker than you ever imagined. Most people see Lois as the long-suffering wife who somehow tolerates Peter's antics while keeping their chaotic family together. But that's exactly what she wants you to think. The reality is that Lois Griffin has one of the most disturbing character arcs in animated television, filled with secrets that would make even the most hardened criminal blush. From her privileged upbringing to her descent into madness, every chapter of her life reveals new layers of dysfunction that will completely change how you see this seemingly innocent character. Let me take you back to where it all began. Lois wasn't always a Griffin. She was born Lois Pewterschmidt into one of the most powerful and dysfunctional families on the East Coast. Picture this, a sprawling mansion in Newport, Rhode Island, where money flowed like water, but emotional warmth was as rare as honest politicians. Her father, Carter Pewterschmidt, built an empire on ruthless business practices, while her mother, Babs, played the role of the perfect trophy wife, both too busy with their own ambitions to give their children the love they desperately needed. But here's where the story takes its first dark turn. Lois had a brother named Patrick, and this family secret will haunt you. As a young child, Patrick witnessed something so traumatic involving his mother that it broke his mind completely. Carter's solution wasn't therapy or family healing. He had his own son shipped off to a mental institution and erased from family history like he never existed. This wasn't just neglect. This was calculated, emotional brutality that would set the tone for how this family handled problems, make them disappear. Growing up in this environment, Lois and her sister Carol developed completely different survival mechanisms. Carol became desperate for male attention, rushing into relationship after relationship, collecting divorces like trophies. By the time we meet her, she's been married and divorced 8 times. Each failed relationship a symptom of the emotional void their parents created. But Lois chose a different path. Rebellion disguised as conformity. As a teenager, Lois discovered a passion for modeling. For once, she had found something that made her feel alive, something that was hers. But when a legitimate modeling contract was offered, Carter crushed her dreams without hesitation. His exact words were chilling. His daughter would not lower herself to such work. This wasn't parental protection. This was control, masked as concern for social status. And this moment planted the first seeds of the resentment that would later explode into her adult dysfunction. College became Lois's escape hatch, but instead of finding freedom, she found chaos. At Kent State University, she threw herself into everything her controlling father had forbidden. She partied with reckless abandon, broke every rule she could find, and made choices that would haunt her for decades. The most shocking of these was starring in an adult film, not for money or fame, but as the ultimate act of rebellion against her family's pristine image. Think about the psychology here. This wasn't some wild phase or momentary lapse in judgment. This was a young woman so damaged by emotional neglect and control that she was willing to do anything to feel like she had agency over her own life. The fact that she shared this secret so casually with a reporter she barely knew tells us everything about her desperate need for authenticity in a life built on lies and appearances. But the real bombshell comes when we examine how she met Peter Griffin. Here's where the story becomes almost too bizarre to believe. Peter wasn't some college boyfriend or family friend. He was literally hired as a pool boy to clean her family's estate. Picture the scene. The refined daughter of a billionaire family falls for a man whose greatest talent is making fart jokes. On the surface, it looks like a classic opposites attract romance. But dig deeper, and you'll see the psychological warfare at play. Lois choosing Peter wasn't love at first sight. It was the nuclear option in her war against her father's expectations. Carter had controlled every aspect of her life, from her career choices to her social circle. So she chose the one person guaranteed to horrify him, a working-class man with zero social graces and fewer brain cells. This wasn't romance. This was revenge, with wedding vows. When Carter discovered their relationship, his reaction was swift and brutal. He had Peter knocked, unconscious and dumped in the middle of the ocean like some kind of mob hit. But Peter survived, and here's where things get interesting. Carter then offered Peter $1 million to walk away forever. Peter's response reveals something crucial about their dynamic. He turned down the money, claiming Lois was worth more to him than cash. But his exact words were telling. He said she was worthless to him, which is why he loved her. This wasn't the romantic declaration it appeared to be. This was two damaged people finding each other through mutual dysfunction. Peter saw in Lois someone who wouldn't judge his failures because she was running from her own. Lois saw in Peter the ultimate weapon against her family's suffocating expectations. Their love story wasn't built on compatibility or shared values. It was built on shared rebellion against the lives they were supposed to live. The cracks in this foundation became obvious almost immediately. When they tried to start fresh, after college, they broke up. Lois got engaged to Tom Tucker, a much more logical choice that her family approved of. But Peter couldn't let go, not because of love, but because losing Lois meant losing his identity as the rebel who stole the rich girl. So he crashed her wedding in a desperate last-ditch effort to reclaim what he saw as his greatest achievement. What happened next reveals the true toxicity of their relationship. Lois was already pregnant with Meg when they eloped, which means their entire marriage was built on necessity rather than choice. She literally couldn't back out even if she wanted to. This detail reframes their entire relationship. Every fight, every moment of dysfunction, every terrible decision can be traced back to this moment when two people trapped themselves in a marriage neither really wanted. Parenthood didn't fix their problems. It amplified them exponentially. Their first instinct as new parents was to abandon Meg at a fire station. When that failed, they took her home to Spooner Street, but the damage was already done. This child represented everything wrong with their relationship. Unplanned, unwanted, and a constant reminder of the life neither had chosen. As more children arrived, Lois's parenting style became increasingly unhinged. With Meg, she started as a protective mother, but gradually became cruel and dismissive. The most heartbreaking example is when Meg pours her heart out, telling Lois she loves her, and Lois can't bring herself to say it back. This isn't just poor parenting. This is emotional abandonment that mirrors her own childhood trauma. But Meg isn't the only victim of Lois's maternal dysfunction. She's physically abused Stewie, getting so desperate for pills that she dunked his head in a toilet to retrieve one that fell in. She ran over him with her car and immediately tried to cover it up, rather than face the consequences. These aren't accidents or momentary lapses. They're patterns of, quote, behavior that reveals someone completely detached from normal parental instincts. Even with Chris, supposedly her favorite, she's done things that cross every line of appropriate motherly behavior. When rumors spread that he was involved with an attractive teacher, instead of shutting down the inappropriate speculation, she confirmed it herself. This isn't protective parenting. This is a woman so desperate for attention that she'll exploit her own children to get it. The drug addiction storyline reveals just how far Lois has fallen from her privileged upbringing. This isn't recreational use or social experimentation. This is full-blown addiction that turns her into a criminal. She starts dealing drugs, becomes a kleptomaniac, and eventually graduates to violent crime. The woman who grew up in mansions is now poisoning baristas and kidnapping innocent people to maintain her position as the best customer at a coffee shop. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of Lois's character is her complete moral flexibility. She runs for mayor claiming to fight corruption, then immediately becomes as corrupt as the person she replaced. She allows oil companies to dump waste in the city's water supply for money. This isn't political compromise. This is selling out an entire community for personal gain. Her relationship with violence is equally troubling. She's admitted to killing multiple people, including a waitress on their honeymoon as part of some sick game with Peter. She traumatized Chris by revealing she'd killed someone with her car, then casually mentioned that all mothers have killed someone, as if murder was just another household chore. The pattern becomes clear when you look at her complete story. Every major decision in Lois's life has been driven by one of two motives: rebelling against her family's expectations, or covering up the consequences of previous rebellions. She chose Peter to spite her father. She had children because she was trapped. She became addicted to drugs to cope with her choices. She turned to crime to support her addictions. Each step led inevitably to the next in a downward spiral that shows no signs of stopping. Her infidelity adds another layer to this psychological profile. Lois hasn't just cheated on Peter occasionally. She's been systematically unfaithful throughout their entire marriage. She's had affairs with Bill Clinton, rock stars from the 80s, and even Peter's own half-brother. The most shocking revelation is her admission that Chris might not even be Peter's biological son, the result of an affair with actor Philip Seymour Hoffman. This isn't a woman struggling with temptation. This is someone who views marriage vows as suggestions rather than commitments. Her pattern of cheating reveals someone incapable of genuine intimacy, constantly seeking validation from new partners because she's never resolved the emotional damage from her childhood. The psychological implications become even more disturbing when you consider her relationships with Brian and Quagmire. Both men have been obsessed with her for years, and in alternate timelines, she's married both of them. This suggests that her appeal isn't based on genuine connection, but on some kind of emotional unavailability that draws damaged men to her like moths to a flame. Her bisexual tendencies, while potentially representing healthy sexual exploration, fit the same pattern. She kisses women impulsively, fantasizes about running away with female cashiers, and engages in passionate encounters with friends' wives. But these aren't expressions of genuine sexual identity. They're more rebellion, more ways to shock and transgress against social expectations. As Lois ages, the consequences of her choices begin catching up with her. By her 50th birthday, doctors are warning she might not survive much longer due to the physical toll of her lifestyle and the violence she's experienced. Stewie planted a time bomb in her uterus as an infant, and Chris nearly killed her during childbirth. These details aren't just dark humor. They're metaphors for how her own children have become weapons turned against her, the inevitable result of her toxic parenting. The future episodes show Lois and Peter still together in their retirement home. But this isn't a happy ending. It's two people too damaged and codependent to separate, even when they probably should. Their adult children push them into assisted living, suggesting that even as grown-ups, the Griffin kids can't wait to get their parents out of their lives. But here's what makes Lois truly fascinating as a character. She's not entirely unsympathetic. Every terrible thing she's done can be traced back to the emotional neglect and control she experienced as a child. Her father crushed her dreams and treated her like a possession. Her mother was absent and cold. Her brother was literally erased from family history when he became inconvenient. Is it any wonder she grew up incapable of healthy relationships or appropriate boundaries? The tragedy of Lois Griffin isn't that she became a terrible person. It's that she never had a real chance to become anything else. Every relationship in her life has been transactional or manipulative. She learned early that love comes with conditions and that people will abandon you if you become inconvenient. So she became someone who abandons others first, who cheats before being cheated on, who hurts before being hurt. Her criminal behavior isn't random chaos. It's the logical endpoint of a life spent learning that rules don't apply to people with money and power. Her father built an empire through ruthless business practices and made problems disappear through violence and money. Is it surprising that his daughter grew up thinking murder and corruption were just more extreme versions of normal problem solving? The drug addiction storyline reveals someone desperately trying to numb the pain of a life she never wanted. The cheating shows someone searching for connection she's never experienced. The violent outbursts demonstrate someone who learned early that force and manipulation get better results than honesty and vulnerability. Even her relationship with Peter, dysfunctional as it is, represents her attempt to break free from the toxic patterns of her childhood. She chose someone completely different from her father, someone who couldn't control or manipulate her through money or social pressure. The problem is that she chose someone equally damaged, someone whose emotional instability matched her own. The most disturbing aspect of Lois's story is how it reflects real-world patterns of generational trauma. Children who grow up in emotionally abusive environments often struggle to form healthy relationships as adults. They may seek out partners who replicate familiar patterns of dysfunction because chaos feels like home. They may become abusive parents themselves, not out of malice, but because they never learned healthy parenting models. Lois's story is a masterclass in how privilege can't protect children from emotional damage. All the money in the world couldn't give her what she really needed. Parents who loved her unconditionally and supported her dreams. Instead, she got parents who treated her like a business asset and a social accessory, valued only for how she reflected on their reputation. The brilliance of her character lies in how the show presents her as both victim and villain simultaneously. Yes, she's done terrible things that hurt innocent people. But understanding why she did them doesn't excuse the behavior. It explains how someone becomes capable of such actions. She's a cautionary tale about what happens when children don't receive the emotional foundation they need to become healthy adults. Her relationship with her own children reflects this cycle of dysfunction. She can't give them what she never received herself. Her inability to say "I love you" to Meg isn't just cruelty. It's the echo of parents who never said those words to her. Her physical abuse of Stewie mirrors the emotional violence she experienced growing up. But perhaps the most chilling aspect of Lois's character is how normal she appears on the surface. She's articulate, intelligent, and socially skilled when she needs to be. She can play the role of the concerned mother, the devoted wife, the responsible citizen. This ability to present a functional facade while being completely broken inside makes her more dangerous than someone whose dysfunction is obvious. The show's genius lies in slowly revealing the depths of her damage over time. Early episodes presented her as the reasonable one, the moral center of the family. But as the series progressed, each new revelation stripped away another layer of that facade until we saw the broken person underneath. This isn't character assassination. It's archaeological excavation, uncovering the psychological damage that was always there but carefully hidden. Looking at Lois Griffin's complete story, we see a masterpiece of character development that illustrates how childhood trauma can echo through generations. She's not just a cartoon character making bad choices for laughs. She's a complex psychological portrait of someone whose entire life has been shaped by early emotional wounds that never healed. Her story serves as a dark mirror to the American dream, showing how wealth and privilege can create their own forms of destruction. The Pewterschmidt family had everything money could buy, but nothing that actually mattered. And their daughter grew up to become living proof that you can't buy emotional health or authentic human connection. The most disturbing realization about Lois Griffin is that she's not an anomaly. She's a recognizable type. We all know people who seem to have everything together on the surface, but whose personal lives are complete disasters. We see them in positions of power, making decisions that affect others while being completely incapable of managing their own emotional lives. Lois Griffin's entire story is a cautionary tale about the price of emotional neglect and the generational transmission of trauma. She started as a victim of her parents' dysfunction and became the architect of her children's future therapy bills. Her legacy isn't the crimes she's committed or the people she's hurt. It's the cycle of damage that will likely continue through her own children unless they find ways to break free from the patterns she's established. In the end, Lois Griffin represents one of television's most complex and disturbing character studies. She's simultaneously the victim of generational trauma and the perpetrator of new trauma, a woman whose entire life has been shaped by her unsuccessful attempts to escape the emotional prison her parents built around her childhood. Understanding her story doesn't excuse her actions, but it does explain how someone becomes capable of such systematic dysfunction while maintaining the appearance of normalcy. The brilliance of her character lies not in the shocking things she does, but in how those actions reflect deeper patterns of psychological damage that make perfect sense once you understand where she came from. She's not crazy. She's the logical product of her environment, which makes her story both more tragic and more terrifying than any random acts of villainy could ever be. Hey there, night owls and Family Guy fanatics. If you're here looking for some sleepy time content about everyone's favorite animated chaos, you've come to the right place. Tonight we're diving deep into the wild world of Quahog with some fascinating Family Guy facts that'll ease you into dreamland. So grab your pillow, get comfortable, and let's explore the bizarre universe that Seth MacFarlane created. Picture this. It's 1999, and a young animator has just pitched what would become one of television's most controversial and beloved animated series. Seth MacFarlane was only 25 years old when he created Family Guy, making him one of the youngest creators in television history to have his own primetime animated show. The pilot episode cost a mere $50,000 to produce, which is practically pocket change by today's animation standards. MacFarlane not only created the show, but also voices 4 of the main characters, including Peter Griffin, Brian the dog, Stewie, the scowling baby, and the perverted neighbor, Glenn Quagmire. Speaking of voices, here's something that might surprise you. The voice of Meg Griffin has changed over the years, but not in the way you might think. Originally, Lacey Chabert from Mean Girls fame voiced the teenage daughter during the first season and most of the second season. However, due to scheduling conflicts with her other projects, Mila Kunis took over the role starting in season 2. Interestingly, Kunis was initially hesitant about taking the job because she thought it was just a temporary gig. Little did she know, she'd be voicing the character for over 2 decades. The show's production history is almost as chaotic as the Griffin family itself. Family Guy was actually canceled not once, but twice by Fox. The first cancellation happened after the second season in 2000. Then it was brought back for a third season, only to be canceled again in 2002. What saved the show was something unprecedented at the time. DVD sales and reruns on Adult Swim were so successful that Fox decided to resurrect the series in 2005. This made Family Guy the first canceled show in television history to be brought back primarily due to DVD sales and cable reruns. Let's talk about the town of Quahog for a moment. While it's fictional, MacFarlane based it on his own hometown of Kent, Connecticut. Many of the locations in the show are inspired by real places from his childhood. The Drunken Clam, where Peter and his friends hang out, was inspired by a real bar in Kent. Even some of the street names in Quahog are taken directly from streets in MacFarlane's hometown. This personal touch gives the show an authentic feel, despite its outrageous storylines. Here's a fact that might keep you up thinking about the complexity of animation. Each episode of Family Guy takes approximately 10 months to complete from start to finish. The process begins with the writers creating the script, which can take several weeks. Then comes the voice, recording, followed by animatic creation, character design, background painting, and finally, animation. A single 22-minute episode requires approximately 15,000 individual drawings. That's nearly 700 drawings per minute of finished animation. Brian the dog is arguably one of the most complex characters in animation history. He's an intellectual who drinks martinis, writes novels, and has strong political opinions. But here's something fascinating about his character development. McFarlane originally intended for Brian to be more of a traditional pet character, but as the show progressed, Brian became increasingly humanized. The character serves as McFarlane's voice for political commentary and social criticism. Brian's pretentious personality and liberal viewpoints often reflect McFarlane's own beliefs, making the dog essentially the creator's animated alter ego. The show's cutaway gags, those random flashback scenes that have nothing to do with the main plot, were inspired by McFarlane's love of classic comedy. He drew inspiration from shows like The Carol Burnett Show and Saturday Night Live. These cutaways became one of Family Guy's most distinctive features, allowing the writers to include jokes and references that wouldn't fit into the main storyline. Some episodes contain up to 15 different cutaway gags, each requiring its own mini production cycle. Stewie Griffin's character underwent one of the most dramatic transformations in television history. In the early seasons, Stewie was portrayed as an evil genius baby bent on world domination and matricide. His primary goal was killing his mother, Lois. However, as the series progressed, the writers shifted his character toward being more flamboyantly gay and less homicidal. This transformation wasn't planned from the beginning, but evolved naturally as the writers discovered what worked best for the character's comedy potential. The show's musical numbers deserve special recognition. McFarlane, who studied animation at the Rhode Island School of Design, is also an accomplished singer and musician. Many of Family Guy's musical sequences showcase his talents, particularly the big band and jazz numbers. The episode Road to Rhode Island featured a musical number that was so well received it spawned an entire series of road episodes pairing Brian and Stewie together. These musical interludes often require months of additional production time and specialized animators who can synchronize character movements with complex musical arrangements. Here's something about the show's writing process that's quite remarkable. The Family Guy writers' room operates differently from most television shows. Instead of having a traditional hierarchy, McFarlane encourages a collaborative environment where any writer can pitch jokes or storylines. The writers often compete to see who can come up with the most outrageous or offensive joke, pushing the boundaries of what's acceptable on television. This competitive atmosphere has resulted in some of the show's most memorable and controversial moments. The character of Peter Griffin was originally going to be named Justin Peter Griffin, but McFarlane shortened it to just Peter. The character's appearance and personality were inspired by a security guard McFarlane knew at his college. Peter's distinctive laugh, that wheezing giggle that fans love or hate, was actually improvised by McFarlane during early recording sessions. The laugh became so popular with the production team that they decided to make it a permanent part of the character. Cleveland Brown, Peter's neighbor and friend, was given his own spin-off show called The Cleveland Show, which ran for 4 seasons from 2009 to 2013. Interestingly, the character was created as a way to add diversity to the main cast, but McFarlane has admitted that writing for Cleveland was challenging because he didn't want to rely on racial stereotypes for humor. The character's calm, measured personality served as a counterbalance to Peter's chaotic energy. The show's animation style has evolved significantly over the years. Early episodes had a more rough, hand-drawn quality that reflected the show's limited budget. As the series became more successful, the animation became more polished and computer-assisted. However, McFarlane insisted on maintaining certain stylistic choices, like the character's simple designs and limited color palette, to preserve the show's original charm. Family Guy has featured an impressive roster of celebrity guest stars over the years. These appearances range from brief cameos to full character roles. What's interesting is that many celebrities specifically request to appear on the show because of its cultural impact. The writers often create characters specifically tailored to the guest star's personality or public image, resulting in some surprisingly authentic performances. The show's controversial content has led to numerous censorship battles with network executives and standards departments. MacFarlane has stated in interviews that approximately 10% of each script gets cut or modified due to content concerns. Some jokes that are deemed too offensive are replaced with alternate versions, while others are moved to the DVD releases as deleted scenes. This constant push and pull between creative freedom and broadcast standards has actually improved the show's writing, forcing the creators to be more clever with their humor. Here's a production detail that animation fans will appreciate. Family Guy uses a technique called limited animation, which means characters are drawn with simplified movements to save time and money. However, the show occasionally breaks this rule for special sequences, particularly musical numbers or action scenes. These moments of full animation stand out dramatically and create a more cinematic feel. The Griffin family house has become iconic in its own right. The interior layout has remained remarkably consistent throughout the series, which is unusual for animated shows. Most animated series change room layouts as needed for specific jokes or storylines, but Family Guy maintains architectural continuity. The house was designed to feel like a real middle-class American home, complete with believable room proportions and logical furniture placement. Quagmire's character represents one of the show's most problematic elements, but also demonstrates MacFarlane's willingness to explore uncomfortable territory for comedy. The character's predatory behavior toward women would be completely unacceptable in live action, but the animated format allows the show to examine toxic masculinity through exaggeration and absurdity. It's a delicate balance that doesn't always work, but it shows the unique possibilities of animated comedy. The show's timeline is intentionally confusing and contradictory. Characters reference current events and pop culture from different decades within the same episode. This temporal flexibility allows the writers to make jokes about any topic regardless of when it occurred. Stewie remains a baby despite the series spanning over 20 years, and other characters don't age either. This suspended animation of time keeps the show perpetually contemporary. Family Guy's influence on internet culture cannot be overstated. The show was one of the first television series to embrace meme culture, with countless clips and quotes becoming viral sensations. The cutaway gags are perfectly suited for short-form internet content, and many viewers discover the show through social media clips rather than traditional television viewing. The voice acting process for Family Guy is quite different from other animated shows. Most animated series record voices individually, but Family Guy often records multiple actors together to capture natural conversation rhythms. This technique results in more spontaneous performances and allows for improvisation that wouldn't be possible with solo recording sessions. MacFarlane has stated that he originally intended Family Guy to run for only a few seasons, but the show's success has extended its life far beyond his initial vision. This longevity has allowed for character development and storyline complexity that wasn't possible in the early seasons. Characters have been able to grow and change in ways that reflect real human development, even within the show's absurdist framework. The show's merchandise empire extends far beyond typical television tie-ins. Family Guy products range from clothing and accessories to home goods and collectibles. The Stewie Griffin character alone has spawned hundreds of different products, making him one of the most marketable animated characters of the 21st century. As we drift towards sleep, it's worth reflecting on how Family Guy changed television animation forever. The show proved that adult-oriented animated comedy could be successful in prime time, paving the way for shows like American Dad, Bob's Burgers, and Rick and Morty. Its irreverent humor and willingness to tackle controversial subjects opened doors for creative freedom that didn't exist before. The Griffin family may be dysfunctional, chaotic, and often morally questionable, but they've provided millions of viewers with laughter, comfort, and escapism. Whether you love them or hate them, they've become part of our cultural landscape, a shared reference point that brings people together through humor. So, as you close your eyes tonight, maybe you'll dream of Quahog, where dogs can talk Babies can build time machines, and anything is possible. Sweet dreams. And remember, in the words of Peter Griffin, sometimes the most important thing is just to keep laughing, even when life gets crazy. Sleep well, Family Guy fans. Tomorrow is another day in the wonderful world of animation, full of new jokes, new characters, and new reasons to appreciate the art of storytelling through laughter. Good night, and thanks for joining us on this journey through the facts and trivia of one of television's most enduring animated families. Picture this. You're lying in bed, scrolling through your phone at 2 a.m., desperately trying to fall asleep, but your brain just won't shut off. You need something familiar, something comforting, something that won't keep you wide awake analyzing plot twists. Enter Family Guy, the animated sitcom that's somehow become the internet's unofficial lullaby. Tonight, we're diving into the most relaxing Family Guy facts that'll have you drifting off to dreamland faster than Peter Griffin running from a giant chicken. But first, let me ask you something. Have you ever wondered why millions of people choose Family Guy as their go-to sleep show? It's not just you. There's actually a whole community of people who can't sleep without hearing the familiar voices of the Griffin family playing softly in the background. And trust me, by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why this chaotic animated family has become the world's most unlikely sleep aid. Let's start with something that might surprise you. Family Guy wasn't supposed to be a bedtime show at all. When Seth MacFarlane first pitched the series back in the late 1990s, he envisioned it as appointment television, something families would gather around to watch together on Sunday nights. The irony is beautiful when you think about it. A show designed to grab your attention and keep you glued to the screen has somehow evolved into the perfect background noise for drifting off to sleep. The science behind this phenomenon is actually fascinating. Sleep experts call it the familiar stimulation effect. Your brain craves just enough stimulation to distract it from the day's worries, but not so much that it becomes fully engaged. Family Guy hits this sweet spot perfectly. The episodes follow predictable patterns that your subconscious mind finds comforting, while the humor provides just enough entertainment to quiet those racing thoughts that keep you awake. Here's something that'll blow your mind. The average Family Guy episode contains approximately 847 individual animation cells. That's nearly 850 hand-drawn images flowing together to create just 22 minutes of content. When you're lying there with your eyes closed, your brain isn't processing these visuals, but it's still registering the consistent rhythm of the animation. This creates a subtle, almost hypnotic effect that naturally slows your heart rate and prepares your body for sleep. Speaking of rhythm, let's talk about those famous cutaway gags. You know, those seemingly random flashbacks that interrupt the main story. Remember that time when has become one of the most recognizable phrases in television history. But here's what makes them perfect for sleep. They're completely self-contained. You don't need to follow a complex storyline or remember plot details from previous episodes. Each cutaway is like a tiny, standalone story that your drowsy brain can process without effort. The voice actors themselves have become part of WWWWW, this sleep ritual for millions of viewers. Seth MacFarlane voices not just Peter Griffin, but also Brian the dog, Stewie the baby, and Glenn Quagmire. His vocal range is so distinctive that your brain immediately recognizes these characters even when you're half asleep. It's like having a familiar friend telling you bedtime stories, except these friends happen to be a talking dog with a martini problem and a baby bent on world domination. Here's a delightful fact that'll make you smile as you drift off. The character of Brian Griffin was originally going to be much more dog-like in the early concept stages. MacFarlane wanted him to occasionally chase cars and bark at mailmen. But as the character developed, Brian evolved into the most human-like member of the family, often serving as the voice of reason among all the chaos. This evolution created the perfect sleep companion, a character whose calm, measured voice could anchor you when the show got too zany. The show's music deserves special recognition in the sleep department. Composer Ron Jones and later David Zippel created soundtracks that perfectly complement the show's mood without being jarring or overstimulating. The background music flows seamlessly from scene to scene, creating an audio landscape that's engaging enough to hold your attention, but gentle enough to let you relax. It's like having a personal soundtrack to your journey into dreamland. Let's dive into something truly remarkable about the show's production that makes it ideal for repeated viewing, which is essential for a good sleep show. Each episode takes approximately 8 months to produce, from initial script to final animation. This lengthy process allows for incredible attention to detail that rewards both active and passive viewing. When you're actively watching, you catch visual gags and subtle references. When you're falling asleep, your brain picks up on the consistency and craftsmanship without you even realizing it. The character development over the years has created something like a comfortable old sweater for viewers. Peter Griffin's predictable unpredictability, Lois's patient exasperation, Chris's awkward teenage energy, Meg's perpetual search for acceptance, Stewie's sophisticated vocabulary wrapped in a baby's body, and Brian's intellectual pretensions all combine to create a family dynamic that feels familiar, even when the situations are completely absurd. Here's something that makes Family Guy uniquely suited for sleep watching. The show operates on what comedy writers call escalating absurdity. Each scene builds on the previous one, but not in a way that requires intense concentration. Instead, the absurdity creates a dreamlike quality that mirrors the way your mind naturally drifts as you fall asleep. Your thoughts become increasingly disconnected and surreal, just like a typical Family Guy episode. The cultural references in Family Guy span decades, from 1,950 seconds television shows to contemporary internet memes. This creates a comforting sense of shared cultural knowledge. Even if you don't get every reference, your brain recognizes the patterns and rhythms of pop culture commentary. It's like being wrapped in a blanket made of collective memories, which is incredibly soothing when you're trying to wind down for the night. One of the most sleep-friendly aspects of Family Guy is its episodic nature. Unlike serialized dramas, where missing an episode means losing crucial plot developments, Family Guy resets after each episode. The Griffin family ends each adventure more or less where they started, which means you can drop in and out of episodes without feeling lost. This removes the anxiety of needing to pay attention, freeing your mind to relax and drift away. The show's approach to time and logic is wonderfully elastic, which mirrors how our minds work during the transition to sleep. In Family Guy, characters can travel through time, alternate dimensions, or simply exist in different versions of reality within the same episode. This flexible relationship with continuity creates a dreamlike atmosphere where anything is possible, but nothing really matters, perfectly matching the mental state you want to achieve before sleep. Let's talk about the genius of Stewie Griffin's character development as a sleep aid. Initially conceived as a villain bent on matricide, Stewie evolved into something much more complex and, frankly, more soothing. His relationship with Brian, particularly in their Road 2 episodes, creates some of the show's most heartwarming moments. These episodes often feature extended conversations between the baby and the dog as they navigate various adventures together. The steady dialogue and genuine friendship between these characters provides the perfect auditory backdrop for falling asleep. The animation style itself contributes to the show's sleep-inducing qualities. The character designs are simple and clean, with bold colors and clear lines that don't strain the eyes during those moments when you're peeking at the screen. The movements are fluid but not hyperkinetic, creating a visual rhythm that's more lulling than stimulating. Even the explosions and action sequences maintain a cartoon quality that feels safe and non-threatening. Here's a fascinating production detail that affects how the show functions as a sleep aid. The dialogue is recorded first. Then the animation is created to match the voice performances. This process, called prelay, means that the timing and rhythm of every line delivery is precisely crafted before any visuals are created. The result is incredibly natural-sounding dialogue that flows like real conversation, making it easy for your brain to process even when you're not fully conscious. The show's handling of music and sound effects is particularly sleep-friendly. Unlike action movies or dramas that use sudden loud noises to create tension, Family Guy maintains relatively consistent, Audio levels throughout each episode. The sound mixing is designed for television broadcast, which means it's optimized for consistent volume levels that won't jolt you awake with unexpected loud moments. Family Guy's relationship with its own absurdity creates what psychologists call cognitive ease. When a show acknowledges its own ridiculousness, it removes the mental effort required to make sense of what you're watching. You don't need to analyze character motivations or predict plot developments because the show itself admits that logic isn't the point. This cognitive ease is incredibly valuable when you're trying to turn off your analytical mind and prepare for sleep. The recurring characters and settings in Family Guy create a sense of home that's perfect for bedtime viewing. The Griffin House, the Drunken Clam Bar, Quahog's various locations, and these places become as familiar as your own neighborhood. This familiarity triggers a psychological response, similar to being in your childhood bedroom, creating feelings of safety and comfort that naturally promote sleep. One of the most overlooked aspects of Family Guy's sleepworthiness is its emotional consistency. While the situations are wildly unpredictable, the emotional core of the show remains stable. Peter loves his family despite being selfish and immature. Lois tries to hold everything together while maintaining her own identity. The kids navigate growing up with parents who are essentially overgrown children themselves. These emotional truths provide an anchor of stability beneath all the chaos. The show's use of cultural nostalgia taps into what researchers call nostalgic reverie, a mental state that naturally promotes relaxation and positive feelings. Whether it's referencing classic movies, old television shows, or bygone eras, Family Guy constantly evokes the warm feelings associated with remembering better times. This nostalgic quality makes the show feel like comfort food for your brain. Here's something remarkable about the show's longevity that contributes to its effectiveness as a sleep aid. With over 400 episodes spanning more than 2 decades, Family Guy offers an enormous library of content that you can cycle through without repetition becoming boring. The sheer volume of episodes means you can watch for months without seeing the same episode twice, but the consistent formula means every episode feels familiar enough to be comforting. The character of Glenn Quagmire, despite his often problematic behavior, serves an important function in the show's sleep ecosystem. His predictable catchphrases and exaggerated personality traits create audio cues that your brain recognizes instantly. When you hear giggity, your subconscious knows exactly where you are in the Family Guy universe, providing a sense of orientation even when you're barely conscious. The show's approach to violence and conflict is uniquely suited for bedtime viewing. Unlike realistic dramas where violence has consequences and emotional weight, Family Guy treats physical comedy like old-school cartoons. Characters can be blown up, flattened, or injured in spectacular ways, but they always bounce back without lasting harm. This removes the stress and anxiety that realistic violence might create when you're trying to relax. Family Guy's relationship with its own timeline creates a dreamlike quality that mirrors how memories work during sleep. Characters reference events that may or may not have happened in previous episodes, and the show's continuity is deliberately loose and inconsistent. This mirrors how your brain processes information during sleep, connecting random memories and experiences in ways that don't always make logical sense. The writing style of Family Guy incorporates what comedy experts call stream of consciousness humor. Jokes flow into each other through loose associations rather than rigid logical connections. This style mimics the way thoughts naturally drift when you're falling asleep, making it easy for your mind to follow along without requiring focused attention. One often overlooked element that makes Family Guy perfect for sleep is its treatment of time within episodes. Unlike shows that maintain strict chronological order, Family Guy freely jumps between past, present, and future, often within the same scene. This fluid relationship with time removes the pressure to follow a linear narrative, allowing your mind to drift in and out of attention without losing track of what's happening. The show's ensemble cast creates multiple entry points for your attention throughout each episode. If Peter's storyline doesn't hold your interest, Stewie and Brian might be having an intriguing conversation. If the main plot becomes too energetic, there's usually a quieter subplot running in parallel. This variety ensures that there's always something appropriate for whatever level of consciousness you're experiencing. The color palette used in Family Guy is specifically designed to be easy on the eyes. The bright, primary colors are bold enough to be visible in low-light conditions, but not so intense that they're overstimulating. The backgrounds use muted tones that don't compete with the character animation, creating a visual environment that's engaging but not exhausting. Here's a production secret that affects how the show works as a sleep aid. The recording sessions for Family Guy often involve the voice actors improvising and riffing off each other, creating natural conversational rhythms that aren't always present in more scripted shows. These improvisational moments add an organic quality to the dialogue that makes it feel like overhearing real conversations, which is inherently soothing. The show's use of callback humor creates what psychologists call recognition pleasure, the satisfaction of understanding references to previous episodes or jokes. This creates a reward system for regular viewers that doesn't require intense concentration. Even when you're half asleep, your brain still experiences the mild pleasure of recognizing familiar references, reinforcing positive associations with the viewing experience. Family Guy's approach to celebrity impressions and parodies provides another layer of comfort for sleepy viewers. The impressions are usually exaggerated enough to be immediately recognizable, but not so precise that they require focused attention to appreciate. Whether it's a parody of a famous movie scene or an impression of a well-known celebrity, these elements provide familiar touchstones that help anchor your drifting attention. The show's treatment of its own mistakes and inconsistencies is refreshingly honest and, paradoxically, quite soothing. Characters occasionally break the fourth wall to acknowledge plot holes or continuity errors, which removes any pressure you might feel to make sense of everything you're seeing. This meta-humor creates a sense that you're in on the joke, fostering a feeling of inclusion and comfort. The pacing of Family Guy episodes is carefully designed to maintain interest without creating urgency. Unlike action shows that use rapid cuts and escalating tension to keep viewers engaged, Family Guy uses a more relaxed rhythm that allows for natural breathing room between jokes and plot developments. This pacing aligns well with the slowing brain activity that occurs as you transition towards sleep. One final thought as we wind down together. The true genius of Family Guy as a sleep aid lies in its fundamental paradox. It's a show about a dysfunctional family that somehow makes you feel like part of a functional one. Despite all their flaws, fights, and ridiculous adventures, the Griffin family always comes back together. They forgive each other's mistakes, support each other through crises, and maintain their bonds despite everything that tries to tear them apart. This underlying message of unconditional family love, buried beneath layers of irreverent humor and chaotic plotting, provides the emotional foundation that makes Family Guy so comforting. When you're lying in bed, vulnerable and preparing to surrender consciousness for several hours, there's something deeply reassuring about spending time with a family that, despite everything, genuinely cares about each other. So tonight, as you settle in with another episode of Family Guy playing softly in the background, remember that you're not just watching a cartoon. You're participating in a ritual shared by millions of people around the world who have discovered that sometimes the best way to fall asleep is to spend time with the Griffin family. Sweet dreams, and don't forget to set your sleep timer.